In this video, you'll discover why pushing and grinding with your podcast won't help you grow, the lazy growth strategy that massive podcasts use to reach new listeners consistently, and how you can do the exact same. Finally, how to be found by hundreds of new listeners who are searching for your content each week instead of you constantly chasing them. So look, my name's Anthony Winery. I'm the co-founder of GetMoreListens.com, a company helping education-based podcasters, business owners, coaches, experts in their field, turn a slow growth show into a rapidly growing, positive ROI show. In the last 4 years, I've interviewed and coached 350 plus podcasters, and I'm also the co-host of Why Your Podcast Isn't Growing, which generates $12,000 of attributed sales each and every month. So 2 years ago, me and my business partner, Tig, attended the Podcast London show, which was a London show filled with tons of different podcasters. As you can see, me and my business partner decided to have some barcodes on our chairs because why not? A bit of free marketing, a bit of free promotion. Looking back at this, we look like absolute twats. However, we did manage to get the attention of the podcasters we wanted to get the attention of, which was great. So when we went there, we wanted to know what worked and what didn't when it comes to podcast growth. And what we discovered shocked us. When we spoke to smaller podcasts, their answers were almost identical. So when we asked podcasters, hey, look, what are you doing to grow your show? They gave us pretty much the exact same answers, which was, hey, we post on social media, interview high-profile guests, and we publish episodes on a consistent basis. Yet, they all struggled with slow growth. They were doing so much, but getting so little. But when we spoke to bigger podcasts and spoke to them about how they grew, the answers were completely different. They basically mentioned, hey, look, we don't rely on social media, we don't focus on podcast SEO, and we leverage highly relevant and timely content in our niche. This is how we grow our podcast, which is interesting. Again, they said we don't rely on social media. So they still use social media, but they didn't rely on it as a strategy to reach new listeners. They focus more on podcast SEO and leveraging highly relevant and timely content in their niche. No mention of viral social media strategies, no constant promotion. Instead, they were doing something entirely different. They positioned their podcast to attract listeners organically. So here's what they focused on. They focused on podcast SEO. These bigger podcasts optimize their show to rank higher on Apple and Spotify. This means that when listeners are searching in specific keywords, search terms, their shows show up highly on search. They're being discovered by new listeners every single day who are looking actively for their content without having to chase them. And number two, creating timely and highly relevant content. So when something is trending in their niche, they cover it immediately. So why do they do this? Well, they do this because when there's news in an industry, that means there's a demand for content. If you think about how mainstream media milks massive headlines to grab people's attention, big podcasts also do the same thing. They create episodes that taps into what's trending right now, what's trending in their space. They then easily attract new listeners who are already searching for these topics, because again, if there's a massive news in your industry, if you're in the investing space and crypto is blowing up, there's going to be tons of people searching crypto. And if you make an episode about crypto and what it means to maybe the traditional investor, you're going to actually attract more of the listeners you want to reach. Within the pool of people typing in cryptocurrency, there's going to be a massive portion of them who are your ideal audience, who are then finding your podcast because you're leveraging and talking about this trending topics. So this strategy is what we call newsjacking, and it works incredibly well for both big and smaller podcasts. We had a recent client who went from averaging 106 downloads per episode to now 160 downloads per episode after using the strategy. So you can see here, this is an actual graph. So I'm going to move myself here. So what we have in the red is the episode that was a newsjacking episode. So she spoke about, her podcast is all about coping and anxiety for people during midlife. And one of the topics she covered was, again, election anxiety, 3 coping skills to stay calm in a divided nation. We can see that this is super targeted when it comes to people in her industry, but also is extremely timely and relevant content to her audience. Because again, the election was going on, people are getting super stressed out, and she was able to capture the demand that was already there for this topic. So when she covered it, you will see that she went from literally getting like 100, on average, 104 downloads per episode. The specific newsjacking episode got 260 downloads for the episode. And then afterward, she was then averaging 162 downloads per episode. So you can see that there's a clear before and after where she's covered this timely content, captured a bunch of new listeners, and then retained those listeners long term as well. So why does newsjacking work so well? Well, it not only brings new listeners to your show, but it turns them into loyal fans. New listeners discover your timely episode, they explore past content, and then they realize that your show was made for them. Again, you're capturing the demand that's already there, being discovered by new listeners. They then check out your podcast because you're covering this timely content. They then listen to the episode, hopefully do an amazing job. They go through your old episodes, realize all the episodes were made with them in mind, and they stay a listener. This is what happens when you do this right. The results? You grow your audience consistently and organically without the constant effort of pushing or trying to promote. You're positioning yourself to capture the attention that's already there. This is how massive podcasts grow, right? They're able to kind of leverage these timely content. They're able to look at what's relevant and trending right now. Can you see how much easier it would be for you to grow by following this strategy? Meanwhile, smaller podcasts are kind of stuck in this grind mode where they're posting on social media, interviewing big guests, publishing valuable content, pushing, rather than positioning themselves as the podcast that captured attention that's already there. But again, they stay stuck in the slow lane when they follow the strategy. The truth is, big podcasts are playing a different game. They focus on positioning, not pushing. They use podcast SEO to be found by listeners who are searching for their content daily. They create timely, relevant episodes to capture the attention of people who are actively looking for these timely and relevant content. If it's news, it's news for a reason. This is the fast lane to podcast growth. So ask yourself, how can you position your podcast to capture the attention of the listeners you want to reach? Instead of constantly pushing, how can you start positioning yourself to capture that attention? There's so many podcasters out there who create incredible content and think they can just rely on promotional strategies, promotional clips on social media, getting high profile guests on, and all these things, which again, pushing. But oftentimes bigger podcasts, which you can just steal their strategy, like anyone can do this. I showed you an example of one of our clients who used this and was able to grow her podcast, reach new listeners, expand her reach simply by positioning her podcast to capture the attention that's already there, rather than her constantly pushing. You can either play this on the slow lane, where again, you're pushing and not getting much results, or you can go to the fast lane where you're capturing the attention that's already there. And that's what I want for you. That's what I want to encourage you to do moving forward this week. So look, if you're new here, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to this video. And if you have any questions specifically about how this might apply to your podcast, be sure to let me know down below in the comment section below. I'll see you in the next video.